In a move that should send a chill down your spine, MGM Resorts just ruthlessly purged approximately 800 mid-level managers from its Las Vegas empire this past week. We're talking supervisors, managers, and even senior managers. Nope, you heard that correctly. 800 souls. The very gears that kept the glittering facade of the Vegas dream machine churning had their livelihoods extinguished in the blink of an eye. And let's be clear, these weren't temporary hands or entry-level staff. We're talking about loyal veterans, individuals who dedicated decades of their lives to this company, who commanded teams of hundreds. They were people who foolishly believed their loyalty bought them security. But here's the terrifying reality. In the crumbling kingdom of Las Vegas, absolutely no one is safe. There's a profound sickness at the heart of this city. A place once erected on the bedrock of working-class hope that now casually shoves its own people into a financial abyss. Las Vegas was supposed to be a beacon of dreams, built from light and faith. Today, the city's sparkle is a cruel illusion. Because behind that dazzling curtain, the very hands that once switched on those lights are being systematically erased. We all watched the fall of Caesars, thinking it was the collapse of a single titan. But now, with MGM bleeding thousands of its own people, you have to ask, is this the next great domino teetering on the edge? Is this the signal of a catastrophic, irreversible chain reaction that will bring Las Vegas to its knees? In today's video, we're going to expose what's truly rotting behind MGM's closed doors, and why this purge signals the death knell for the Vegas dream. It all started with the tremors that shook the tourism industry. It wasn't just Caesars. The contagion of financial pain began to spread down the strip, infecting MGM. A damning report from Cover.com lays it all bare. MGM's Las Vegas net revenue for the second quarter of 2025 is projected to plummet by a staggering 4% from the previous year. Now, that number might sound deceptively small, but for a behemoth raking in nearly $2 billion a quarter, that's $80 million that has simply vanished into thin air in just 3 months. Enough cash to pay the salaries of over 1,000 of those very mid-level employees for an entire year. And to paint an even grimmer picture, occupancy at the MGM Grand cratered by nearly 4 percentage points. That translates to tens of thousands of ghost rooms, sitting empty and silent every single quarter. At the same time, the table game hold, a sanitized term for how much the casino rips from its players, fell disastrously short of expectations. The gamblers are still at the tables, but for the first time, the house isn't winning with the same ruthless efficiency. And when you mix these toxic ingredients together, their adjusted profits in Las Vegas got torched by nearly 9%. That's a $100 million bonfire of profits, scorched into ash by the brutal desert heat. For a titan like MGM, this wasn't just a setback, it was a critical system failure. This entire corporate machine is dangerously dependent on a steady flow of international tourists, particularly from Canada and Asia. The moment that flow weakens, the slightest tremor is enough to shatter the entire foundation. And now the tourists themselves are sounding the alarm. They're crying out that it's the labyrinth of sophisticated financial traps and the onslaught of outrageous fees that are gutting the very soul of Las Vegas. And believe me, this isn't just a handful of disgruntled opinions. It's a mathematical certainty. When the price you pay skyrockets past the value you get, the backbone of this city, the budget and economy-conscious visitor, the very people who keep places like Luxor and Excalibur afloat, simply walk away. They're staying home, finding cheaper thrills, or just putting off the trip entirely. Consequently, the immense pressure now falls on the very foundation that was supposed to keep this city stable. But this poison isn't just spreading from within the country. The international floodgates are closing. Visitors from Canada, a crucial lifeline during the winter months, have vanished in alarming numbers thanks to a crippled Canadian dollar. Combine that with a growing unease over volatile border policies, and suddenly, a trip to Vegas feels like a dangerous gamble. Every single demographic is pulling back piece by agonizing piece, leaving behind a wasteland of thousands of empty rooms and gaping financial wounds that are impossible to stitch up. especially during the midweek lulls that were already on life support. It turns out the very customers the casinos dismissed as insignificant are the ones now delivering this devastating blow. And despite a desperate barrage of so-called stimulus campaigns, from pathetic welcome signs to insulting discounts and cheap credit combos, the fundamental sense of being ripped off has not gone away. The casino floor lights blaze on, a hollow spectacle over thinning crowds and empty gaming tables. Entire sections of luxurious suites are now shuttered, as silent and dead as ghost towns in the desert. MGM may not have imploded with the same force as Caesars, but the cracks in its foundation are undeniable and spreading. And this isn't a simple story about failed discounts or clumsy promotions. At its rotten core, this is about a fundamental betrayal of trust. The shattered belief that the price you see is the price you pay, and that the experience you get is worth a single damn cent of your hard-earned money. So, the price is out in the open, but the magic is gone. Where does the blame lie? Is it the nickel and diming, the hollowed-out experience, or the unholy marriage of both? In this relentless pursuit of cost optimization, are these corporate giants gutting the very soul of this city? The magic that once guaranteed visitors would always come back for more? But the true price of this gamble never appears on a balance sheet. As the revenue streams dry up and the corporate vice tightens, the real pain begins to trickle down. It's the frontline warriors, the bellhops, the housekeepers, the shift managers, who are the first to be crushed under the weight of these decisions, feeling the impact with brutal, devastating force. And just last week, the axe fell. A staggering 800 mid-level managers at MGM Resorts in Las Vegas were unceremoniously cut loose, the news ripping through local social media like a wildfire. It painted a grim picture of departments being cannibalized, forcing supervisors, managers, and even senior executives into a desperate corporate Hunger Games for what few positions remain. Make no mistake, this isn't just about seasonal workers anymore. The very backbone of operations, the crucial buffer between the front lines and the ivory tower, is being systematically dismantled. Of course, the official narrative is sanitized with bloodless corporate speak. Structuring, realignment. But behind the jargon, a terrifying question looms. Is the tourist drought on weekdays and the casino's razor-thin margins the real culprits? Are they now sacrificing their own people on the altar of EBITDA? While only the corporate insiders know the full truth, one fact is brutally clear. 800 human beings, many with decades of loyalty and experience, had their livelihoods and futures snatched away in the blink of an eye. The local online forums erupted with a mixture of shock and sheer terror. As one person put it, "My heart breaks for everyone in hospitality." This is deeply alarming. And that alarm isn't just ringing for management. If the supposedly stable pillars of the industry are crumbling, what hope is there for the frontline workers hanging on by a thread? The very people who rely on every hour, every tip? This corporate bloodbath is just one part of a citywide crisis. The entire Las Vegas job market is in a freefall, with local media reporting a hemorrhage of jobs. A staggering 4,300 jobs vanished in a single month, a catastrophic sign that the rot has spread deep into lodging, food service, and construction. Against this bleak backdrop, a purge of management isn't just a cut. It's the push that could send the entire chain of dominoes toppling. The survivors are left overworked, the guest experience is stretched to its breaking point, and those midweek vacancies become a gaping wound. And history casts a long, dark shadow from 2010 and 2020. We saw this when the entire industry seized up and MGM callously jettisoned 18,000 employees system-wide after a hollow furlough. For the veterans who lived through that, the ghost of being fired, rehired, and discarded again is a nightmare that never stops replaying. So is this restructuring a temporary fix, or the first tremor of a catastrophic earthquake, triggered by fickle tourists, predatory junk fees, and the phantom recovery of international travel? Because at the human level, every one of these streamlining decisions isn't a number on a spreadsheet. It's a family's story being torn apart. It's the mortgage payment that's now in jeopardy, the college tuition that may never be paid, the promise of caring for aging parents now broken. These middle managers were the glue holding it all together, the daily firefighters, the keepers of discipline, the bridge between corporate fantasy and frontline reality. With them gone, the entire service infrastructure loses its ability to withstand the slightest shock. It's no wonder the locals are screaming about the death of the Vegas experience, not just the price of a room. The neon lights of Vegas still burn bright, but behind the facade, the very people who keep those lights on are vanishing. The question they should be asking isn't just how much can we cut to make the numbers work, but who must we keep to preserve the soul of this place? Because while balance sheets can recover, the loyal, experienced people, once they're gone for good, they may never come back. If the tremors are already shaking the executive suites, what unholy cataclysm awaits those on the front lines in the months to come? Beneath the glittering spectacle of the Strip, a silent rot was spreading, far more insidious than any cost-cutting app. Caesar's humiliating fall from the S&P 500 wasn't just a blow to one company. It was a blaring siren, a dire warning that the first great domino was about to fall for the entire industry. And now, MGM, a titan, a very symbol of the Las Vegas dream itself, is teetering on the brink, poised to be the next colossal domino to crash under the force of that seismic shock. When a titan of the industry is ripped out, the smart money doesn't just walk, it flees, desperately reallocating capital before the contagion spreads. The first tremor of the earthquake is coming. Caesar's expulsion from the S&P 500, effective September 2025, is the trigger that financial insiders warn will unleash a catastrophic domino effect. We're already seeing capital hemorrhaging from high-risk assets. The specter of interest rate hikes is looming, and an impossible demand for profits is being forced upon every other company in the game. As this financial chokehold tightens, corporate giants like MGM are being forced to accept a terrifying reality. Las Vegas is no longer their sanctuary. Their entire empire rests on the fragile pillars of midweek occupancy and foreign tourism, the two legs that are instantly kicked out from under them by soaring travel costs or the slightest tremor in investment flows. And when the illusion of value is shattered, guests will start demanding their money's worth, forcing them to seek cheaper havens or slash the length of their stays entirely. In this new, brutal landscape, the weekend crowds may provide a false sense of security, but the midweek wasteland is where the industry will bleed out. This is how the poison spreads, a shockwave cascading from the opulent penthouse suites down to the struggling budget motels, infecting everything from the top of the tower to the ground floor where real people work. This chain reaction is a horrifying spectacle of financial fragility colliding with the crushing, immovable weight of operating pressures. When the debts come due, you can't just stop paying your staff or fixing the plumbing even as your revenue evaporates into thin air. That's when their paper-thin financial buffer will be utterly annihilated. Be warned, some of MGM's flagship properties simply cannot survive a sustained onslaught of empty nights or the chaos of unpredictable guest spending. In the short term, they'll resort to desperate measures, slashing costs and gutting departments to stop the bleeding. But in the long term, this only poisons the system, breeding decay and a catastrophic decline in service quality. The customer experience is sacrificed, trust is obliterated, and the next domino is already set to fall. And when a giant like MGM finally collapses, the true cost won't be measured in lost revenue, but in the lives of the small operators, the bellmen, the housekeepers, and the technicians who are cast into a terrifying new zone of risk. Once the middle management layer, the system's shock absorbers, is hollowed out, the entire service engine begins to seize, stretched to its absolute breaking point. Complaints go unanswered, service grinds to a halt, and critical details are ignored. The soul of the hotel dies not with a bang, but from 1,000 unpatched wounds of neglect. This death spiral, if not stopped, will become a plague, starting at MGM and spreading across the entire casino strip. Because all these properties feed from the same trough of customers, the same predatory pricing rules, and the same fickle visitor psychology. Now they're peddling a so-called solution, all-in pricing, with a hollow promise of no surprises from brands like Marriott, Hilton, and even MGM Resorts. The flimsy theory is that if customers are tricked into believing the price they see is the price they'll pay, and the actual experience isn't a total betrayal, this might somehow stop the avalanche. On top of that, they talk about patching up the gaping wound of midweek performance, dangling promotions for international tourists, and throwing money at the frontline experience. All desperate gambles to feign confidence when the real investment has already fled. But make no mistake, if MGM is the next domino to fall, the line between recovery and total collapse will not be drawn by weekend party crowds. It will be determined by the structural integrity of a service infrastructure that has been left to rot from the inside out. Will these corporations ever look beyond their spreadsheets to see the individuals holding this whole charade together? Do they not understand that if they can't retain their people, there will be no one left to keep the damned lights on? Out on the strip in the morning, the neon glow surrenders to the sun. But beneath that glittering facade beats the precarious, desperate rhythm of the people, fueling the tourism machine through grueling shifts, unpredictable tips, and the relentless threat of rent that waits for no one. The labor market is already signaling a clear and terrifying downturn. In just one summer month, the Las Vegas area bled around 4,300 jobs, according to the latest DTR report. That number doesn't tell a story, it screams a warning. It reveals that the city's safety net is being systematically shredded at the precise moment it needs to be at its strongest. The real war is being fought in the daily, brutal calculations of the workers. Average rent in Las Vegas is a crushing $1,900, climbing to $2,000 per month. And while they claim price hikes have cooled, for the service workers, that's not a high bar. It is an insurmountable wall built to keep them out. It's an absolute outrage, especially when Nevada's minimum wage is a pathetic $12 an hour, and a stable work week is a fantasy for so many. Even for a unified workforce, that advertised $16 an hour becomes a cruel joke when shifts vanish and the cost of survival skyrockets. And here's the brutal reality. When the midweek ghost town arrives, paying the rent transforms into a desperate, losing race against the clock, not some abstract number on a corporate spreadsheet. The very concept of affordable housing here might as well be science fiction. Are we shocked? The horror stories of tiny apartments for $950 a month sparking a feeding frenzy of hundreds of applicants just confirm the grim truth we all secretly whisper. Demand has utterly decimated supply, turning anything remotely habitable into a prize for the fortunate few. When the very people who but don't look for a single villain in this tragedy. They claim the new all-in pricing is transparent, a supposed gift allowing tourists to scrutinize every dollar. But the tourists from overseas still haven't returned in the numbers they prayed for. And while the post-pandemic exodus has slightly cooled the inferno of rental prices, they remain obscenely high for the people serving the drinks. Don't be fooled by the glossy facade. The workers never abandoned Vegas. They were forced to abandon their lives, cobbling together second and third jobs, enduring soul-crushing commutes, and fleeing to the fringes just to stay afloat.